What is up, everybody? Welcome to Football Diehards. Today, we're going to be giving one last look into Week 1 of the NFL from a DFS perspective. I'm here with Jamie. What is up, Jamie? Are you looking forward to Week 1 of the NFL?
Oh my God, this is Christmas morning. Yeah, good to be talking with you here, Jason. I'm looking forward to overspending in DFS this week and, hopefully making some money out of it and most importantly, just watching football.
Yep, I'm excited for it as well. I got all my lineups in already, so looking forward to it, looking forward to this show. So I guess we'll start with just general strategy. What are you looking at for today in terms of cash strategy? You playing much cash or GPP this week?
Yeah, I'm predominantly a cash player, so about 85 to 90% of my bankroll will be double ups and head-to-heads, and then a few single-entry GPPs. Cash strategy this week is starting to shape up with a lot of value receivers, which you and I have talked about before. And then, outside of that, we've got some sub 4,000 receivers that are going to be heavily owned in cash that you're going to want to kind of build around. And from that point on, making the decision on the top tier running backs, quarterbacks, and or Travis Kelce to fill out the lineups, I think, is the path to go for that.
Yep, I'm definitely with you there. I think cash is pretty straightforward this week. There's so much value at wide receiver that we'll talk about where you can pretty much play any running back you want. So that's kind of how I'm looking at in cash. In tournaments, I think it's very interesting because you take a look at some of the ownership and you see a lot of these very cheap wide receivers, very low owned, or high owned. Marcus Callaway is actually the highest owned projected wide receiver on the entire slate. So I thought in tournaments, going up and getting some of these studs like a Devontae Adams, like a Stephon Diggs, like a Calvin Ridley, they're not going to be completely unowned, but I do think they're going to be going a little bit overlooked this week. So that's kind of how my strategy went for in terms of tournaments is, going up and getting some of these stud wide receivers that look like a little bit too low owned this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Callaway is a fun topic with that because, like you said, he is the highest owned, which, at $3,400, you have to eat that in cash. But going up against the elite cornerbacks and safeties that Green Bay has, there is a path to downside with him as well, even at that price. I mean, he's an unproven playmaker in the NFL. He's flashy in the preseason, and he looks like he has the chemistry with Winston. But, they could conceivably shut him down in that secondary. So I like the GPP fade on him and also going up and spending on wide receivers, like you said.
Yep, I'm with you there. So I say we get into it game by game here, and let's start with a game I'm really looking forward to. We have the Falcons going against the Eagles here. What sticks out to you here in terms of players you're looking at?
This is a fun one. Right off the bat, Jalen Hurts is the one that we're talking about from this one. He brings a Lamar Jackson-like rushing floor to the table, which automatically puts him near the top of the priority list for quarterbacks. In 3.5, I guess we can say, starts this year, he rushed for 282 yards and 3 touchdowns. So the $6,400 price tag against Atlanta is really nice. And you can utilize him in GPPs. I don't think you necessarily need to stack with him because the receivers and the tight ends and Miles Sanders is a bit of a question mark of who's going to be the most targeted. But you can run Hurts, as they say, naked in GPPs if need be. And I do like Miles Sanders as well. I think Devontae Smith is going to lead the Eagles in targets, but Sanders is really sneaky. Atlanta is a pass funnel offense. They sell out to stop the run, but they've allowed the most receptions to running backs for 4 straight years. So he's a fun one that I think you can get at no ownership. What do you think about the Atlanta side of that?
Yeah, I think the Atlanta side is interesting. I did mess around with some Atlanta stacks in terms of Matt Ryan. I just love, Russell Gage, Calvin Ridley especially, and like we mentioned earlier, going up and getting Calvin Ridley, who I don't think is going to be overly high owned. I think I saw him around like 60% owned this week, so I do like that quite a bit. And then also Kyle Pitts, who it looks like everybody's on this week, and rightfully so. He's a very cheap tight end there. I do like Kyle Pitts quite a bit. But for me, I'm more on the Eagles side myself. I did go with Hurts in cash. It was between him or Murray for me. I ended up taking the $1,200 savings with Hurts there. I think he still has that same rushing yard upside. He averaged 11.5 rushing attempts in his starts last year. So get a nice floor there, and I'm with you. You can definitely play him naked. I actually did play him naked in cash. In my stacks, I mean, it's just tough. Like Jalen Hurts, I just don't know really who to stack him with. I went with Devonta Smith, if anything, but there's just so much question marks. He gets 4,500. I do think he'll be low owned, but we have not seen anything from him yet. Rookie, I think the talent's there, but we just don't know. So I did actually take some shots on Devonta Smith, but I'm not overly excited about it. I think going Jalen Hurts alone is definitely fine as well.
Yeah, and the Pitts side, I wound up choosing him as my cash tight end. It was between him and Kelsey, and all week I was saying that I wasn't going to fade Kelsey, but my lineup is just looking better with Pitts as the tight end, and the fact that he looks to be the highest owned tight end is making me feel a little bit better about that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I ended up going with Pitts as well. Just made roster construction a lot easier. We are going to be the highest owned tight end projected at 24% ownership, which is a ton. He's sitting at 13. So I definitely have my fair share of Kelsey as well. But in terms of cash, I did end up going with Pitts there. So yeah, very interesting game there to start it off. I say we get into the next one here, and let's go to the Jacksonville versus Houston game. Do any others draw your interest here?
I love the entire Jacksonville offense in this one. I mean, they're not going to get a better matchup than this. I have pieces of this game scattered all over cash and GPP. I have a full stack of Jaguars passing game a couple of times in GPPs. James Robinson is this is an interesting one because I think he's coming in lower owned than some of the running backs that are priced around him, like Joe Mixon and Najee Harris, and I don't argue them at all. But this is one thing that I think I'm going to go against ownership and put Robinson in my cash games. At the very least, going overweight on him in GPPs. The Texans project to be one of the worst teams in football. They allowed the most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs a year ago. No improvement to their defense in the offseason. So with Etienne on injured reserve, I think Robinson's going to feast on them. I know Carlos Hyde is there, and he could steal some goal line touches or grind out the fourth quarter if Jacksonville is up big. But at $6,400, I really like Robinson. We're talking FanDuel. Robinson is a flat-out lock at $5,900 over there. And then in the receiving, I think you can make a case for any of them in any format, but Marvin Jones at $3,600 is standing out as one of the top plays. He's familiar with the offense from Darrell Bevel, and he's got the most pedigree, and rookie quarterbacks tend to lean on that. Where you stand on that game, and are you using any Houston?
I can't use. There's just nobody that I'm really interested in on the Houston side, really at all. I do like the same players that you do like. I like Marvin Jones Jr. in terms of a very cheap wide receiver, 3,600, and then I'm probably just as high as you on James Robinson. I have a ton of James Robinson this week. I didn't end up going with him in cash. I know somebody else we'll talk about later, but I definitely think he is viable in cash. I have a ton of him in tournaments. Of course, you mentioned Etienne's going to be out for the season, so it's going to give Robinson a touches here. He averaged points last year. He looked like a beast. I'm very high on this guy. I like him. I even drafted him in season long as well, so hopefully he does good. And you cannot ask for a better matchup. But you mentioned how bad Houston is going to be more than likely this year. And I think James Robinson is absolutely in a smash spot. We saw earlier in the week that Robinson was barely owned, but it looks like he is gaining some ownership a couple hours before the slate locks, but still pretty low owned nonetheless. And James Robinson is definitely somebody I'm high on. One of my favorite running backs on the entire slate today for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And 6,400 just doesn't seem that prohibitive for him. And I'm interested that he's gaining ownership. I only just noticed that myself.
Yep. How can he not? I mean, he's in a very good spot this week. I mean, like I said, you cannot really ask for a better matchup against this Houston Texans defense. So I do like that quite a bit. Moving on to a game that really does interest me here. So we have Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks going against the Colts here. Anything sticking out to you on this one?
This one is bugging me. I'm not going to lie. From the Seattle side, I think that this is the Colts are a total pass funnel defense. They stop the run and they're vulnerable through the air. They completely funnel to the pass. So Wilson, Metcalf, Lockett stacks are fun in GPP. Metcalf alone is viable, I think, everywhere now with Xavier Rhodes out. He was the only line of defense that I could see stopping Metcalf, and even he was questionable with that, with Metcalf's size and speed. So I have a lot of DK Metcalf kind of scattered around as just a one-off in GPP. Lockett has a tougher matchup because of Indianapolis' slot corner, whose name is escaping me at the moment. But he was good defending the slot. On the Indianapolis side, the part that's bothering me the most is Michael Pittman's ownership, and I'm curious of your take on this. It looks like, according to our ownership projections, he's coming in as the second highest owned wide receiver on DraftKings at 48,100, and that's bothering me a little bit because I just wasn't considering him, and really I'm still not. And going again, Wentz missed all the preseason. He didn't have a chance to build up any kind of chemistry with his receivers. So, I mean, this is one that I'm going to probably be toying over right up until kickoff of whether I want to eat that chalk or whether I want to go with what I'm thinking is that Pittman is not the play this week and a more a wait-and-see approach with how he connects with Wentz. So I'm very curious of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the ownership definitely does surprise me. I thought I was going to get him a lot lower owned than that, but yeah, I don't mind Pittman, but yeah, that ownership is definitely scaring me a little bit. And I ended up having some Russell Wilson stacks. I think Russell Wilson's definitely in a great spot this week against a Colts secondary who's definitely beat up in general, not great in general. And then, of course, on top of that, missing Xavier Rhodes, I think that's huge there. So, yep, I have a lot of Wilson, Metcalf, Lockett. Ran it back with Pittman, but yeah, the ownership on Pittman definitely is something to monitor there. What's interesting is Metcalf's only coming in at 11.71% ownership. I like that a lot. I think Metcalf is definitely in a smash spot. Like you said, I think you can, play him by himself. I don't think you need to stack him with Russell Wilson. But yeah, with Xavier Rhodes out, I think it makes Metcalf an absolutely phenomenal play. Average 18.5 DraftKings points last year. And I think he's in a very, very good spot here. But other than that, yeah, Wilson, Metcalf, Lockett, Pittman for me. Anybody else stick out to you in this game at all? Running backs?
I think Nyheim Hines is a good GPP play if you want to play the game script game, if you want to think that the Seahawks are going to win this one, if Wentz is not quite up to speed or if he's rusty or slow or anything. Seattle allowed the fourth most receptions out of the backfield last year. So that's more mixed multi-entry kind of dart throws in here and there. He's not one of my main targets, but I do think Hines has some merit just based on if you want to play that game script game.
Yep, definitely get that there. Hines is coming in at about 1.62% ownership. I think that's about it for this game here, and we will move on to the next game. We have the Jets going against the Panthers. I think there's a lot of intriguing options on this game here. Maybe not the best game on paper, but I think there's some options that really do stick out to me at least. Anything sticking out to you in this game here?
Yeah, this is a good one. And like you said, it doesn't look like it should be, but it really is. I mean, on the Panthers side, Christian McCaffrey is priced out for me on FanDuel, but certainly not on DraftKings with the PPR and the bonuses. He's fully healthy, so getting him at 9,500 is a bit of a bargain. I think anybody in the passing game is viable in either format. The Jets corners began the year as a bottom 5 graded unit, and they allowed the 10th most passing yards per game last year. They're totally beat up on defense, missing linebackers and part of their secondary. So any piece of Carolina to me is viable. On the Jets side, Elijah Moore is a cash lock to me at 3,000. He should play every down with Crowder and Keelan Cole out. We don't know what his upside or downside is, but he's free, and he's going to have an every down role. And then Corey Davis is 4,900, which seems far too cheap to me as well. The problem is I'm probably not playing Corey Davis in cash because I'm playing Elijah Moore, and I'm not doing both. So where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I like Elijah Moore quite a bit. Going to get a ton of targets this week is at 3,000 minimum. So definitely looking forward to playing him. And yeah, I mean, I think these Panthers wide receivers, just in general, like every week, they seem always like underpriced and they always seem to perform. Moore and Anderson, I think they're both in play. You mentioned the Jets secondary. I don't think they'll have anything for them. And then Terrence Marshall Jr. is also another 3K guy, minimum slot receiver. I think can make some noise there. McCaffrey, I ended up going with in cash. How can you not? He's 9,500, which I honestly think that's a little still too cheap, especially against the Jets here. I think McCaffrey's going to have a phenomenal day. I ended up having a ton of McCaffrey in tournaments as well. And there's a lot of other options I like at running back, but I'm able to go up to get McCaffrey in a lot of lineups. So, why not go up and get him? He is sitting at about 21% this week, which, for Christian McCaffrey, that definitely kind of does seem low there, right? Like, I think he's going to have a phenomenal day. I like him quite a bit. I was kind of messing around with the Darnold stacks here. So he has 5,000. I like a lot of his receiving options. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrence Marshall Jr., even McCaffrey you can stack him with as well. I think McCaffrey's going to get a ton of receptions. Of course, a nice run back option with Elijah Moore as well, who is 3K. So I was kind of messing around with some of those builds. Didn't end up going with a ton of them, but it was something I was looking at. Do you have any interest at all in stacking Sam Darnold on the Carolina side today?
Yeah, I got a few of them. I have, I think, 3 unique ones, and pretty much doing it the way you said it. Double and triple stacking, incorporating McCaffrey into those things. I didn't get Dan Arnold, who we didn't mention in any of my Panthers stacks, but I did use him as a punt one-off somewhere because, I mean, the Jets allowed the most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends last year. Believe it or not, Arnold led all tight ends in average depth of target last year. So I think he's a sneaky one as well. So I'm very high on the Panthers offense this week.
Yep, I definitely think they should do well. Anything else stick out to you in terms of this game?
I don't think so. I'm leaving the running backs for the Jets alone, and the tight ends. I don't think there's any real upside to playing any of them. What do you think? Are you playing Zach Wilson at all in this one?
Probably not. I can't do
it. I didn't use him either. It's it's funny because I'm so high on the 2 main Jets wide receivers, and he has rushing upside as well. I just in that 5,000 range, if I'm there, I'd rather be playing Darnold, and so or just taking that savings from the Jets receivers and paying up at quarterback. So I don't have any of him either.
Yeah, I feel that. I just wanted to see what Elijah Moore's coming in at 12% ownership. Any thoughts about that?
It seems low. It seems like it should be more, and I don't really care if it goes up or down for cash. I'm playing him regardless, and if it stays in that range, I feel even more comfortable with running him out in GPPs.
Yeah, I do think that seems low as well. Randall Moore, somebody else that is 3K minimum as well. He's actually 5% higher owned than Elijah Moore, just about. So, I like that as well. We will move on to the next game here. And we have the Detroit Lions going against the San Francisco 49ers. Is anything sticking out to you in this game here?
The 49ers running backs and GPPs are fine. It's possible against this team, the Lions team, who allowed the second most fantasy points per game to running backs last year. It's possible the 49ers run this ball 40 times against them. So I think that both Mostert and Sermon have GPP ability. Other than that, not so much. Kittle is too cheap, I think, at 6,300 on DraftKings. The problem is I either want to just the fact that I think San Francisco is going to run so much and they're not going to need Kittle. I either want to go up to Kelsey, down to Pitts, or down even further for GPP and just punt the position. Where do you stand on anything in the passing game with the 49ers, or are you just on the running backs too?
I don't mind some of the 49er. Like Brandon Ayuk stuck out to me, 5,700. I love the matchup, but yeah, my concern is the same as yours. Like, if they do get out ahead, are they going to just run the ball 40 times? That's my only concern. but I think the matchup is absolutely there for Ayuk. So he was sticking out to me 5,700. Of course, Kittle definitely does stick out. He is 10% owned, but again, I'm with you where I'd rather go up and get Kelsey, or I'd rather just go down and get Pitts down there. So not really much for me for this game. TJ Hawkinson sticks out. He's 4,900. Detroit tight end there. I guess he sticks out a little bit, but again, I'm just really focused on getting either Pitts in my lineup this week or Travis Kelce in my lineup this week. Didn't really end up going with many other tight ends in my lineup. So Mostert, you mentioned Mostert. I do like him, 5,800. I think he has that boom or bust potential where, he can break off a big run. We saw it multiple times last year. The problem with, Mostert is the guy's made out of glass, but in DFS, you don't really have to worry about that. I think he has some big play upside. He is coming in at about 10% ownership, so not terrible there. But yeah, I think if anything for this game, I'd probably take a look at Mostert, maybe a little bit of Ayuk this week, but not too much interest, to be honest.
I think we're in agreement also that the Lions passing game outside of Hawkinson is off the radar. But what do you think of Swift this week? He's one that I'm been back and forth on, and it looks like there's absolutely no ownership on him. Are you playing him at all?
I'm not playing him at all, really, but I definitely do get it. I'm a big fan of Swift myself. There's just so many guys I like around the range. He's sitting at around 6,900, right? Probably won't get there much, but yeah, he's decent. And what you mentioned, the ownership was probably like really low, right? Like,
it looks like it's around 1%.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Probably won't get there this week, but I'd be taking a shot on Swift, especially at 1% ownership. The talent is definitely there. The matchup is not really there, but I do think he's very solid.
Yeah, I like it too. He's definitely one that I've been back and forth on. I wound up letting him go. He's not in any of my lineups, so if I get egg in my face on that one, I'll take the loss.
So let's move on to the next year, and we have the Vikings. It's the Bengals, a game that I'm looking forward to quite a bit. Anything sticking out to you on this one?
You said you're looking forward to this game? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Are you?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite ones for a stack. The Vikings have a super concentrated offense now with Irv Smith out. So I have several Cousins, Jefferson, Thielen stacks run back by either Mixon or one of the receivers. I have a full Bengals stack with Burrow, with 2 or 3 of their receivers there, just because they're so egregiously priced, even with a tougher matchup. The Vikings should have a much better defense this year than they had last year. So I am a little bit wary of thinking the Bengals truly unlock their upside this week, but they're all just so cheap. I think Mixon is great in all formats. I'm just looking at the ownership. He's coming in at one of the higher, 13%. So not quite near the top, but definitely people are on him at 6,200 on DraftKings. And then Dalvin Cook could kill them in this game, just with his opportunity share and the fact that the Bengals have nobody up front to stop the run. So I have, kind of like the Jets-Panthers, I have pieces of this game scattered all over the place. I have a Bengals receiver in cash. I'm not sure yet which one it's going to be. Right now it's Boyd because I think he has the safest PPR floor. But T. Higgins at 4,700 is tough to ignore as well. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I ended up having some Burrow stacks. I do like the Bengals side quite a bit. You mentioned just how I don't get this pricing points for Bengals and some of their wide receiver options, and even the Bengals in general. Like Joe Burrow, 5,700, that's way too cheap. Joe Mixon, 6,200, that's way too cheap. T Higgins, 4,700, way too cheap. Boyd, 5,200. So I ended up having a lot of the Bengals stacking here. I do like Joe Burrow quite a bit in terms of he's going to throw the ball a ton. I think he averaged around 40 passing attempts last year. So you're going to get the volume. I think the Bengals are going to have a much improved offense this year. They did add Chase, who did not really perform well in the preseason, but I do think that's going to help out quite a bit. I'm very high on Mixon myself, 6,200. Ended up going with Mixon and Cash. Actually, it was between him or Robinson for my last spot, and I'm going with Kamara and McCaffrey for the other two there. But yeah, I like Mixon quite a bit. I think he's going to get a ton of opportunities. I think he has 20-plus touch upside. Solid matchup here against the Vikings. Like you mentioned, their defense is going to be improved from last year, but still I think he's going to get a lot of usage in this game. On the flip side, of course, you have great options as well. You have Jefferson, you have Thielen, you guys like that. So, and then Cook as well, 9,100. I messed around with a cash build earlier in the week, and I was actually able to get McCaffrey, Kamara, and Cook all in the same lineup, which was very interesting. But yeah, Cook's definitely in a smash spot. I don't think he has that same upside or ceiling as a McCaffrey, who's going to catch the ball, just about 10 times. But I do think Dalvin Cook's very capable of a 100-plus rushing yard game. Couple touchdowns mixed in there as well. So yeah, I think Dalvin Cook's a great play. Anything else stick out to you in terms of tight ends? Tight ends for anything like the Vikings or the Bengals? Any tight ends stick out to you?
I think you can use Conklin and GPPs just as kind of a deviation off the receivers. My only issue, the Vikings concern me as far as passing volume goes. So I think if I want to put any kind of eggs into that basket, it's going with those receivers first and foremost. I think you're more onto the correct path to passing stacks with the Cincinnati side. And it's funny your cash lineup you mentioned. I had Mixon, Kamara, and McCaffrey as well. I chose James Robinson, and there's still time to consider that as well. And there's a point later on, which we'll talk about when we get into the later games, so I'll save it for then, which might get Mixon back into my cash lineup. And he's been my guy all off season. I've been touting him to everybody. So, at $6,200, it seems like I should be playing him after all the chattering I've been doing on him. But as of right now, I chose Robinson, but we'll see how that works.
Yeah, they're both really close to be right. I think they're both phenomenal plays this week, Robinson and Joe Mixon there. Yeah, something interesting. I'm taking a look at the ownership now, and Tyler Boyd is coming in at 1.79% ownership.
That bugs me for cash as well. I do think that Burrow is going to have to get the ball out quickly, and that suits Boyd better than the other ones. So I'm still tinkering, but that ownership is great for GPP. A tad concerning for cash, though, especially if you consider that I'm trying to find T. Higgins at 5.45%. So he's got considerable amount more ownership at that price. So that's definitely one that's going to take me to kick off as well.
Yep, Higgins about 5%. Chase is about 5% as well. And then we see Boyd down there at like 1.79%. I think that's very interesting in terms of tournaments go. I think Boyd is definitely somebody I'm considering in tournaments for sure. We will move on to
Bengals stats. Do you have Chase in those Bengals stats?
Yeah, I actually have like one or two Chase. I'm taking a shot on. I'm not in love with it. I'm kind of higher on Boyd and Higgins, but hey, you never know. You never know. Maybe he can go out there and perform well. He had a terrible preseason, but we'll see what happens. So, but yeah, not too excited about it, but we'll see what happens. All right, so moving on to this next game, which is the second highest total on the slate. We have the Cardinals going against the Titans. And yeah, very good game here to target. I think we're going to talk about a lot of players on this one. What's sticking out to you here?
Oh, my God, absolutely. And I'm with you. I know the first time we talked DFS, Kyler Murray was our quarterback here. I want him to be my cash quarterback so much. Right now, it's not working. I'm a couple of hundred short on him, and Josh Allen is who I have in there, which I'm fine with. I think it's splitting hairs to say who is better than who on that thing. The pace of this game and the over-under, I think it's 53 points right now, the last I saw. I do think you need some sort of piece of this if you're going, one or two specific lineups, because it's going to be one that there's a lot of fantasy points scored in. Murray Hopkins stacks are really good for this one. There's nobody in the Tennessee secondary who has any chance of stopping Hopkins, who it's incredible. As good as he was in Houston, his career high in catch rate came last year. in Arizona with Kyler Murray, and he is definitely due positive touchdown regression after only scoring 6 last season with Arizona. So I love Murray and Hopkins in all formats. You mentioned Rondale Moore earlier. It's interesting to me that right now his ownership is coming in at better than or more than Elijah Moore's. I do think Elijah Moore is the better cash play, even though Rondale Moore is another guy that I've been touting in the offseason because I think he's going to ascend to that wide receiver 2 spot in Arizona quickly. I have a ton of him in GPP at 3,000, so I'm definitely on this game. Where do you stand on the Arizona? I know you're a big Kyler guy, and then what about Tennessee? Tennessee is the intriguing one to me too.
Yeah, so for the Cardinals side, I do have Murray and a couple Murray stacks for sure. I like Hopkins a lot. We mentioned earlier that I think, Hopkins is going to go a little bit overlooked just because, all the cheap wide receivers are getting all the ownership this week. So we do see Hopkins coming in about 12% ownership, not terrible there. And then I do like Randall Moore in terms of stacking him up with Kyler Murray. I'm with you that I do think Elijah Moore is going to be the better cash play for me. And that's interesting that we do see that Randall Moore is coming in about a 5% more ownership. On the Titans side, I'm looking at Derrick Henry. He has 8,800. Of course, he's not going to get the same reception upside as an Alvin Kamara, as a Christian McCaffrey. I think Henry's fine. I think he's always in play, pretty much any week. In terms of the Tennessee receivers, I think A.J. Brown's fine. I'm interested in Julio as well in terms of run back options. But yeah, mostly for me, it's going to be the Murray stacks, Murray, Hopkins, a single stack, or maybe Murray, Hopkins, Moore, double stack for me. Maybe run it back with like a Brown or a Julio. Anything else sticking out to you that we did not mention?
No, I think you covered it well. I will say though that you mentioned that Hopkins' ownership seems a little depressed because of the cheap wide receivers. And if we're looking also though, it also seems like he is coming in at lower than all the other expensive ones. A.J. Brown has a higher ownership. Ridley, Diggs, Devontae Adams, and Tyreek Hill all are coming in higher owned than him. So I really think that pushes him up, someone that I would prioritize in GPPs because he has the ability and the game environment to outscore them all.
Yep, 100%. Good point. Definitely do like that there. But yeah, definitely a good game here. Definitely something I'm going to have a ton of exposure to. Like I said earlier, I was debating all week between Murray or Hurts in cash. Ended up going with Hurts for the savings, but I think Murray is definitely in a phenomenal spot as well. So moving on to the next game here.
Like I said, I have Josh Allen, but I'm just putting it out there that if I can dig up that extra couple $100, I will go with Murray. They're about the same ownership right now, so to me, I'm fine with Allen, but I do have Murray as a little bit better of a play in this one.
Yep, no shame in that. And speaking of Josh Allen, he is coming in about 13% ownership here. We have the Steelers versus the Buffalo Bills here. So you mentioned you do like Allen here. Are you stacking him up? Are you running him single, or what are you doing here with Allen?
I have one GPP with a Bills stack where I just went with Allen Diggs and ran it back with Najee Harris. In cash, I have just Allen. I didn't feel the need to push for Diggs, so I think it really is the only other safe play on the Bills. That group of Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders and Gabriel Davis, I think you can throw any of them in if you want to double stack Bills in GPP. I just don't have a lean whichever way that will go. I mean, I would say Beasley, but Emmanuel Sanders has such glowing camp reports. I don't know if they're just going to start to feature him. That all that COVID stuff with Beasley in the offseason has really kind of put a little bit of a cloud on him as far as how they'll use him. I don't know. I don't know what the team's view of him is right now. So for me, it's Allen and Diggs, nobody else. I'm not interested in the running backs. I'm not interested in the tight ends. What about you?
Yep, same exact thing. If anything, I don't have much Josh Allen, but I think is a great play here. I do like Diggs quite a bit. On paper, maybe not the best matchup, but that doesn't really matter. I think Diggs is one of those guys that is definitely matchup proof. So with you there, I think Allen and Diggs stack is definitely something to consider. I do have a few of those myself on the Pittsburgh side. Great run back options: Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool. You mentioned Harris as well. Yeah, very interested in Harris this week. Of course, rookie running back. I ended up not having a ton of them. There are some, players I do like around the price range, but what are your overall thoughts of Harris, and what's your kind of exposure to him this week? Do you have a lot of Harris, or are you kind of staying away, seeing how he plays throughout the first week?
I stayed away, and it's not because that I don't like him per se. It's just that I just like all the other running backs that are priced near him more. We mentioned Mixon and Robinson already, who are, exactly in that same range. Antonio Gibson is cheaper than him. I just would rather have them this week. Harris should be used in the passing game. He has a passing game pedigree out of college. If we're expecting him to land somewhere in between peak Le'Veon Bell and peak James Conner, he's going to be a good one to roster each week. But he just didn't make it into my lineups this week just because I like the other running backs better. But I do like Harris. If anyone asks me, should I play Harris this week? Absolutely. I wouldn't argue taking him out or putting him in for any of those other guys as well.
Yeah, for sure. Harris is coming in at 7.85% ownership compared to James Robinson, who's around that price range, who is currently 14.72%, and Joe Mixon, who is 13.25%. So he is the lower owned out of that little group there of guys I really do like. And I'm with you. I think Harris is definitely in play. I think he's a good play. It's just, I like Robinson a lot more. I like Mixon a lot more. It makes it really hard for me to get to Harris personally, but I do think he's definitely somebody to consider this week. I think he's in a solid spot, and I think he's going to have a solid season. And he's probably too cheap this week as well. I think his price probably does go up as the season does go along. Anything else for this game at all?
Nope, I think we covered it. And that ownership does merit putting him in GPPs. If you think he's even with Mixon and Robinson and you want to play him at the lower owned, by all means, go for it.
Yep, for sure. I agree there. Let's move on to the next game. We have the Chargers going against the Washington football team here. Anything sticking out to you on this one?
No, not really. Eckler looks like he's going to play. I think in GPPs, I'm not stacking either side of this game. I think there's individual plays in it that you can use on the Chargers if you want to throw Eckler and Keenan Allen in as one-offs. The one that I do like is Antonio Gibson, who is far too cheap, I think, at $5,900. I don't think we're going to see him on pure passing downs, even though they hinted that we might. But it's hard to believe, but he only had a 43% snap share last season. That's going to increase dramatically this year. So there's really not a whole lot of room for downside, even in a tough matchup against the Chargers. So I think Gibson is playable in all formats. I didn't play him in cash, but I have several spots. He fit nicely into GPPs around some of the wide receiver stacks that I was using. So I like him, but he's about it. What about you from this game?
Well, I think Keenan Allen, somebody that's always in play just for the target upside, the reception upside. But I'm with you. I do like Gibson here quite a bit. Not the best matchup in the world, but he's way too cheap. Like, I don't get this price point, $5,900. He has 15 to 20 plus touch upside here at home, solid touchdown upside as well. And we definitely see that his ownership is up there quite a bit. He's projected to be owned 17.17%, which is one of the highest on the entire slate. And I think it's one of those cases where he's just way too cheap on DraftKings here. Any thoughts about that ownership? You think it's more of a price thing?
Yeah, I do. He just fits. He does fit so well. And again, though, for cash, sometimes you have to go with the players that you just like better in that same range. And I like Mixon and James Robinson better. So if I need the savings to go down to $5,900, which I didn't, I'm fine with him in cash. He's a good play this week. But I do think that's definitely a pricing thing. Someone who's being drafted at the back end of the first round, in seasonal leagues, coming in at $5,900 catches a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, the price point just doesn't really make much sense to me. And yeah, I don't have a ton of Gibson this week, mostly because I do have more Mixon, I do have more Robinson, but I definitely think he's one of the more solid plays, one of the more solid value plays, especially at running back. Just way too cheap. The price just makes absolutely no sense to me. We touched on Eckler a little bit. He's questionable. He is expected to play. Not a ton of interest in him. I think he's fine. I do like other guys a little bit better. In terms of the Washington receiver, any interest in the Washington receivers? You have McLaurin, Cam Sent. Any interest in those guys?
You can use McLaurin at $6,400. That I think is a price that we're not going to see again, just based on his talent level and his target share that we should expect, and finally having a quarterback that can get him the ball. I didn't anywhere just because the price tag didn't fit, and I'm not stacking this game. But if you say you're using McLaurin as a one-off in GPPs, you don't get any argument from me.
Yep, I agree. McLaurin is definitely someone that always does stick out to me for sure. Let's move on to the next game here. And we have the Browns going against the Chiefs. So this game, I believe, is the highest total. I think last time I saw it, it was sitting around like 54.5 points. Yeah, probably a very interesting target here. I think it's going to be a very high-scoring game. What plays are sticking out mostly to you?
This is the toughest one. And I was on with Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey last night, and we talked about this game, and we mentioned it is the highest owned, or the highest projected point total, and he brought up a good point that Cleveland made every attempt to slow it down in the playoffs last year, and it wound up being a 22-17 game, and you think it would behoove Cleveland to do that again. I still, I would go with the Vegas total on this, just knowing the Chiefs offense for what it is. So I think that any of the big three, Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, are cash viable if you have the money for them. I personally would spend on another wide receiver over Hill, which the ownership isn't reflecting. It seems like Hill is coming in at one of the highest owned wide receivers on this slate. Kelsey was the one that I really, really wanted in cash, and until yesterday I had him in. But like we mentioned, it made my overall lineup look a little more solid top to bottom when I used Kyle Pitts. And then, knowing that he is higher owned at tight end position, I felt comfortable with that. But, I mean, triple stack Mahomes or double stack Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, all you want. As long as you, I think, pick the right Browns bring back, which is a tricky proposition, you can be in good shape with the team totals as what they are in this one. So what do you think about that? And who would you bring it back with if you are stacking Chiefs?
Yeah, that's the tricky part, right? Like, I was kind of, I don't know. I was thinking maybe Odell is somebody to consider. He is a little bit beat up, though. He's questionable. I believe he's going to play. He is 5,400. Just seems weird seeing Odell so cheap here at 5,400 there. So maybe Odell's somebody to consider. I think like a really interesting, sneaky run back option would be Kareem Hunt, just in terms of the game script, how the Browns are decent-sized underdogs. If they do get behind, I think Kareem Hunt can definitely be used in the passing game. The talent is definitely there, but of course Chubb is the main guy in terms of running the ball. But yeah, I think Hunt's interesting in terms of run backs. What's interesting to me, though, is the ownership of the Chiefs. I thought they would come in a lot lower owned than they're projected. It looks like Mahomes is the number one projected quarterback in terms of ownership. Looks like Kelsey's like the number 2 projected tight end in terms of ownership. It looks like Hill is like top 4 in ownership. So that kind of surprises me because I thought I would be getting the Chiefs at a lot lower owned than they are this week. But, a lot of people are playing them, and how can they not, right? Like, this is a game you definitely want to target. I do like Mahomes stacks. I like Mahomes Kelsey the most. I like that single stack a lot. It is expensive, of course. And then, like you mentioned, who do we run it back with? For me, I guess take a shot on Odell. I don't love it. And then, of course, Kareem Hunt is somebody that I also considered. But the run back options is where it gets really tricky for me there. Anything stick out to you in terms of run backs?
No, I think you hit it. I used Hunt as mine just for the reasons you gave. For me, it was also between Hunt and Odell. But I think with all the with all these kind of reports. We'll see how Odell feels. We think he's going to play. He's questionable. He should be cleared. That uncertainty has me a little bit concerned about his snap count. And I think if the game script goes the way that we think it's going to go, where the Chiefs do win this game pretty handily, then it's Hunt time out of the backfield. So he was the one I went, but I think you're right with those are the two main focus on Browns bringbacks. But it is very tricky there, and I agree with you as well that I was surprised that seeing the Chiefs ownership this high, because they're all priced mid-season pricing. Right now, you're not getting a bargain on any of them. So with all the values on week 1 pricing, I thought people would go away from the Chiefs, but Chiefs are gonna Chiefs, I guess.
Yeah, they definitely are. Any ideas in terms of the Chiefs' potential, like other guys? I think we talked about Kelsey, we talked about Hill, we talked about Mahomes. Any other Chiefs that draw any interest from you at all? I know McCall Hardman is 4,800. He's coming in at 2% ownership. You have Robinson down there as well. I know that the offense is mostly built around Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill. But anything else in terms of any Chiefs that you like besides those three?
Hardman has a 99th percentile speed score, so he always has that capability of 2 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. So in deep mixed multi-entry GPPs, certainly you can play him. I didn't, because I don't play that style with 150 entries into those big things. But certainly you can there. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is semi-interesting, just because I think they felt comfortable enough with the cuts they made at running back to keep 3 running backs with him being the lead back. The problem with him is he didn't break out like we thought he was going to last year, and they have these other running backs that can kind of be an annoyance to all of his strengths. Like, they can give McKinnon the red zone packages, and Darrell Williams could just out carry him. So I think Edwards-Helaire being the best receiving back on the team, he's playable. I just didn't do it. I stuck to the main 3 there.
Yep, and it's hard not to, right? Like, I think probably have Kelsey a lot there. I have some Mahomes, Kelsey stacks. Didn't have a ton of Hill, but I think if anything in this game, I do like Mahomes, Kelsey stack there. Anything else sticking out to you in this game, or do you want to move on to the next one?
No, I think we covered it.
All right, so moving on to the next game here, and we have the Packers going against the Saints. I know there's a lot of things that do stick out for me here. Anything for you? Well,
yeah, this is the big decision right now, I think. So the Saints, I have Kamara and Marcus Callaway, both as cash locks. They're the first 2 I entered in. We mentioned Callaway earlier, just as far as, you got to eat the price tag in cash. He's the highest owned player coming in on the slate out of all positions, I think. So at 3,400, you eat that in cash. With the Green Bay secondary, I'm fine fading that in GPP. Kamara has averaged over 31 DraftKings points per game without Michael Thomas, and an extra almost 5 carries per game without Latavius Murray. The fact that he's cheaper than both McCaffrey and Cook, and the fact that like you said, we can easily fit in another stud running back alongside him. I'm not fading either one of those guys in cash, and I'm overweight on Kamara and GPP as well, as really the only playmaker. So on the Packers side, this is the tough thing, because Marshawn Lattimore was downgraded to questionable, which is never a good sign for availability. Devontae Adams was matchup proof. Is matchup proof for the most part. So I would have been comfortable playing him even if Lattimore played. But if Lattimore does not play, I think that puts Adams in a receiving tier of his own, even above these other guys that we've been touting. And the tricky part is this is a 4:00 game. So I already made the kind of tinkering to see, what happens if I want to play Adams. And it kind of became McCaffrey Boyd would change out to Mixon Devontae Adams for me in my cash lineup. So, the decision I'm making is, am I okay with just doing Mixon Adams anyway, which is good, no matter what. But I have to fade McCaffrey, and then you invite that downside if Lattimore does play. So this is a decision that will be tough. So where are you on this? This is an interesting one to me.
Yep, I definitely think you're putting yourself in a good spot there. Yeah, if Lattimore does not play, makes Adams a even better play. Like I already like Adams in general. I'm with you. I think the guy's matchup proof. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, Lattimore out, that is going to bump Adams up for me for sure. But like you mentioned, it is a 4 o'clock game, so that's the only thing. Adams is coming in at 18.03% ownership already, and then Marcus Callaway coming in at 24.63% ownership, which makes Marcus Callaway actually the highest owned on the slate. And yeah, I definitely get it. I have Callaway in cash, pretty easy decision there for me. I have Kamara in cash as well, pretty easy decision there for me. Kamara is going to be the second highest owned running back on the slate, actually behind Christian McCaffrey. So it's pretty clear that Kamara is in a smash spot here. I love the matchup. I love that he's going to get a ton of targets, a ton of receptions. Who else are they going to throw the ball to besides Marcus Callaway? So I think those two guys are somebody that I do like quite a bit. In terms of tournaments, though, that's where that ownership does get very, very scary, because I don't love the matchup for Callaway. I think it's a very terrifying matchup, to be honest, but he is 3,400. He's very cheap. You don't need much. I think in cash, he's probably a must play, but for tournaments, I do think there are other options you can definitely get to. On the Packers side, you mentioned Devontae Adams, very high on him. Other than that, not much really sticks out in terms of the Packers there. Any thoughts on Randall Cobb, 3,900, very cheap wide receiver there?
I think you can. You mentioned Callaway's ownership and working on maybe fading him in GPPs. I think the reason you can do that is there's so many viable sub $4,000 wide receivers. Some we mentioned are the rookies that we mentioned, and Marvin Jones in Jacksonville. I think Cobb can fall into that category as well, just as another passing option for such an efficient quarterback that he already has a chemistry with. I don't have him anywhere, but I think he can be used. And then Tunyon for similar reasons.
Yep, I'm with you there. Don't have a ton of Cobb, but I did throw like a little sprinkle of them in there for sure. Anything else in terms of this game, or do you think we covered it all there?
What do you think of Aaron Jones? $6,800 is a pretty appealing price tag, even in a tough match. I didn't use him, but I won't argue it. What about you?
Yeah, I mean he's cheap, but the problem is there's just so many great plays. I'm going up in my builds, and I'm getting Kamara, I'm getting Christian McCaffrey, I'm getting Dalvin Cook, or I'm going down, I'm getting Mixon, I'm getting Robinson. So I'm really focused on those guys. But yeah, I mean this price is very intriguing on Jones, and I'm trying to find his ownership. He's sitting at 8%, 8% owned for Aaron Jones, which is very, very intriguing there. But again, I mean, I just like so many other guys that it's just really hard to get there. But I would not hate anybody for taking a shot on Aaron Jones this week at that price tag, and especially at the ownership as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
All right, so let's move on to the next game. And we have, oh my goodness, we have the Broncos going against the Giants. Any interest? Can you name any players they have interest on this one for this game here?
I wish I could, but I don't. I think the only two plays that I'm interested in this one are the two defenses. And you can use them both for GPPs. I would not spend. I'm not a spender in cash on defense, so 3,300 for the Broncos, even though it's an appealing matchup, is not something I'm looking to do in cash. But certainly with the offensive line concerns and Daniel Jones's lack of wherewithal under pressure invite sacks and turnovers. This is really hurting me to say, right now. I would have liked to have said that Barkley would be usable, but just so many concerns about usage, and his price tag is not a bargain. On the Denver side, I don't see really any kind of upside from them either. I think Jerry Jeudy can be used. He's cheap enough, and I think he's not going to be the one that sees James Bradbury's coverage. I think that's going to go to Sutton. So I don't have a problem with playing Jerry Jeudy in GPPs. I wouldn't play anyone from this game in cash, just because it's such a low total. nobody on the running game invites anything. Neither quarterback invites any kind of upside for this one. So I'm staying away. Anyone for you?
No, not really. I mean, I have Jerry Jeudy in season long, so I'll be rooting for him. But other than that, I just really don't have much interest in this game in general. I think it's one of the lowest totals on the entire slate. So yeah, no, you can't really pick out anything. I'm with you. I do like the Broncos defense. If I was to pay up for a defense, which this week I ended up not doing that, but if I was to, I think the Broncos are in a very good spot here in terms of going for a defense. But for me, I kind of punted down a defense for the most part for this week. And then, I say we definitely move on from this one. And then we have one last game here that we'll talk about, and it is the Patriots going against the Dolphins. Another game where not much is sticking out to me. Anything sticking out to you on this one?
No. Well, I wrote about this one pretty extensively, actually. Just kind of as a game where if you're going to use somebody, you want to be very smart about where you go. So the only ones in this game that I don't even want to say recommend playing, that I would be okay with playing, is the two lead running backs on each team. Damien Harris on the Patriots side is a tad too cheap for my taste at $5,200. I think he's fittable into GPP plays. He doesn't offer anything in the passing game, which hurts on a site like DraftKings, but he has an average just under 5 yards per carry for his career, and he faces far less backfield competition, most notably in the red zone, Cam Newton not being there to vulture away his touchdowns if they get within the 5-yard line. So I think he's fine as a GPP one-off. And then the same goes for Gaskin on the other side. The Dolphins' offensive line looks to have a lot of issues, so we could see checkdowns for Gaskin, who was second among our running backs in yards per carry and third in yards per route run. I didn't wind up using them at all, but those would be the ones I would use. The passing games, I'm not interested at all. Where do you stand on this game?
Yeah, not much interest for me, to be honest. I think Harris is definitely interesting, but you did mention the lack of passing upside that does hurt definitely quite a bit. I did have a lineup or two of Mac Jones, 4,400, and I did stack him up with Myers, who is 5,100. Mac Jones is 2% owned. Myers is 1% owned. Taking a shot on that, just very cheap there. Don't love it, but 4,400 quarterback, you really don't need much there. So I took a shot on that. And other than that, not much stuck out to me. In terms of run back options, again, there's not much on the Dolphins that you like, really. Just a very, very a game that I'm not looking forward to. Anything else for this game at all?
No, I think we about covered this one. You just got to remember that in this game, if you're going too deeply in it, that both these teams are very strong defensively and will look to slow the game down. So it's not a game that you really want to focus too hard on.
Yep, 100%. I think it is one of the lowest totals on the entire slate. So, yeah, that's about it. We went through all the games. Any final thoughts for the slate at all?
No, have fun. Enjoy football. Don't check your lineup every 5 seconds, even though we all know we're gonna.
It's so hard. It's so hard not to check your lineups nonstop. I'm going to try not to do so. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the season being back. I'm looking forward to hopefully having a great season and hopefully kicking it off great in this week one. Week one's always very interesting. It seems like, at least for me, it seems like it's the hardest week because there's so many plays that do stick out. I'm sure we're going to get a ton of surprises this week, but yeah, definitely looking forward and looking forward to making some money, hopefully. So that is about it. You can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers. You can follow Jamie on Twitter, JAC3600. And yeah, we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Good luck, and hopefully we make some money and have fun as well. See you guys.